All right, well, good morning. Welcome to session 2 of district negotiations between the district and SEIU FPSU for paras and ECPs. We'll get started with some introductions. I'm Tim Kubrick, Chief of Human Resources, and I'll start with this side of the table. MJ, if you could introduce yourself and we'll work around. Jean.
Good morning. Jean Marie Middleton from the Office of General Counsel.
B. Danielle Williams, Office of General Counsel.
Diane Wyatt, HR Compliance.
Charles Bailey, Para 2.
Tamika Berry, ECP2.
Good morning. Cherie Norford, Para 2, Title 1.
Shay Marshall, Chief Negotiator.
Ryan Riley, Senior Organizer, SEIU, FPSU.
All right. So in our last session, we did go through what we recapped in the last session, so I'm not going to go through all that. I am going to start with one proposal that the district brought forward for ECPs working in the capacity of a teacher. We have Ms. Steele here, who is the Director of Early Childhood, who can speak more to this, but what we're trying to do here is just expand eligibility to make sure that anybody who's assuming the role of a teacher is compensated appropriately for it. That's it. Any questions on that? Yes.
The question that I have is where you have in a 3-year-old classroom, also you need to include a 4-year-old classroom as well, because those are 2 types of classrooms. The 3-year-old classrooms are just like a regular 3-year-old Head Start, in the Head Start programs, the Head Start classrooms. The 4-year-old classrooms are Head Start and VPK included.
Steele?
Am I on?
Red is on.
Okay,
Yep, you're good.
red is on. Thank you so much. Thank you for your comments. We originally wrote this for just the VPK teachers and the Head Start teachers that are also VPK. But what we realized is that we had left out, quite frankly, the 3-year-old teachers. So we made an exception to capture them this year, but we wanted to put it in here so it was truly clarified that they, in addition to the VPK teachers, are eligible if they're working on behalf of that lead teacher.
So my request is, can you add 3-year-old and 4-year-old classrooms?
Do you want to explain the situation we just talked about?
Well, there's a situation that just occurred recently that at first that this in red wasn't there, and we did have a 3-year-old ECP that was working in process of a lead designee in a certified being out, and she was asked to take, of course, the requirements, but then she ended up being asked to take the requirements that was of a 4-year-old. So she did extra trainings instead too, and then she realized, okay, then she found out she was asked to do extra than what she needed to do. So I appreciate that the 3-year-olds are included, but I just would like to see the wording 3-year-old and 4-year-old.
Thank you. That situation is what brought forward this reconsideration of how we were doing the language. And so the 3-year-old, any teacher serving as a, may I answer that? Any teacher serving as the lead teacher will be asked to take the literacy requirements, which is just a professional development, and the standards requirement. We didn't have that written here, so we did not enforce that for this particular situation. But going forward, it'll be any para that serves as a lead teacher will be asked to take the literacy training and the standards training, which most of our ECPs have done that already.
So clarification, you're saying ECPs and not paras? Are you including the para twos also?
We have another paragraph that provides that if a para can meet the qualifications of an ECP, that they're also included. We are trying to be inclusive.
Right.
We're just getting to that appropriate
For
language.
the past couple of years, it's, Mr. Marshall, so you're aware, Ms. Steele has brought forward a couple of proposals to really try to make sure that everybody who's doing that work is paid appropriately. So we are doing our best. Now, is there a reason why the 4-year-olds would need to be in there, or are they already part of that?
I will have to go back and read the new language. So
Okay.
I'll make sure that they're included, but originally, I believe it's the ECPs only work in the VPK classrooms.
They're in the VPK classrooms and in 3-year-old classrooms.
And 3-year-old, but the 3-year-olds are part of Head Start. So we consider Head Start, but that's what gets so complicated. That's why we're having to like fix this so that we get the right language in it.
So I
So I
think-
appreciate you bringing it forward. I'm sorry.
No. I think what we'll do is take a look at it and try to fine tune it, just to make sure that once we do put some new language in, that it captures everybody we want it to capture, that we can capture, and we'll bring it back next session. then.
Yes, thank you. I just kind of wanted to kind of add in, just put in 4-year-olds.
Sure,
So
understood.
when people are looking at their contract, they won't think, oh, it's just 3-year-olds. No, it's including 4-year-olds too, but sometimes you got to lay it out plain.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, and if we are adding language, it needs to make sense and need to be there, so.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll take a look. Next was just the Joint Study Committee. And then this is some of the language that you brought forth in session 1. That was the preamble. District Internet. So I did in our caucus talk with our CFO who oversees IT in the district, and the only challenges that we have are in our schools that she's aware of is cell phones. Sometimes cell phones don't work so well in some of the buildings because there's, concrete walls all around you, and, using your cell phone is a challenge. But connecting to the district internet, the district internet is the same internet that all of our, the guest internet is the same that the internet would use if you were an employee too. It's just a different, so the coverage is the same. And if there are any areas that are like kind of not such great service in there, she said we just have to submit a ticket, so we'd have to let the school know. But there is, access to the district internet as is that she's, aware of, so. And we haven't heard any other issues with it, so. All right. These are just typographical errors, and with that, we'll turn it over to Mr. Marshall for a review of the proposals you brought today.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Ryan, if you'll distribute.
I think everyone should have a copy.
Do you have
if we're
copies
good.
already?
Yes, we do.
Great. That makes my life a lot
You don't
easier.
have to share, I got extras.
We're good.
Okay, great, okay.
So we can skip those first 2 pages because we just talked about those, so that's fine. So for those of you who were in the last session, you're going to see a lot of the repeats here.
Right.
Just for point. So, Tim, we talked about this a little bit from the last group that met. So this is the same proposal. I think the reason that we're trying to make sure this is in here is because there's only the one-time option to do this, where they can move into their previous position. We've got a couple folks, we checked in on it, that weren't aware that their previous position was vacated for whatever various reasons, and feel like they didn't get the opportunity to go back to it. So we're just asking that if that happens, that they're just notified about it so they can exercise the one-time option. If they decide not to go back, that's on them, right? Like, I mean, that's fine, but that's what we're trying to get at.
Understood.
All right. Flip over, so this has to do with the, I believe there's already a set committee, if I recall correctly. Basically saying that our folks will be invited as non-voting members to discuss on the EBC. That's kind of where we're at. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay. I'd have to take a look at that, and, you know, the EBC is a teachers, the teacher union.
Well, and that's why we put
Meeting.
the non-voting members, because we understand that, but it is worth having that audience, I guess you could say, to discuss things that are going on, to make folks aware of it, because we know that obviously, you know, decisions come out of this group that are impactful to our folks. Again, we're not asking for voting rights on this, we're just, you know.
Yeah, so in these meetings, you know, they vary somewhat across the district in that some, I've heard, have the whoever's in charge of the EBC on the teacher side is communicating with other staff members already. I believe that's happening in a number of schools I've at least, you know, heard of directly. So, but I'll touch base with them and just see what we think on this and what makes sense.
Thank you. Surplus computers again,
Yep.
always fun. This is the orientation language we talked about. We're still open to, like you said, the online.
Yeah,
we can have a discussion about
we talked about that in our in between sessions, and you know that's something that you know I think we could probably manage, but you know we have an online system that everybody watches, so
Yep,
we would
so that
just-
we can go.
We would need a video.
Yeah, we can figure something
know.
out on that. Yeah, 100%. So we're, I guess this is more of a technicality more than anything else. Make every effort to. I think this is like, no, we need a workspace for this. Not, well, we can't find anything. We tried. It's like, okay, well, not try. Like, we need this secured. Now, I don't know what that looks like. There's no parameters for this. I don't know if it's a desk up front or a desk in the back, whatever it might be, a table, something. But making sure that folks have an appropriate space.
Is this? I haven't heard this problem.
I heard it come up a couple of times in the meetings where it's more of a background noise situation or other conversations going on kind of situation. If you're interpreting, you've got to be able, I mean, look, I speak hillbilly, and it's hard to understand sometimes. But, you know, I know that it is sometimes difficult to be able to filter out everything else while you're still trying to do that. So I think that's related to this.
Okay, we'll just have to take a look to see what language might already be in there, if they already have a right for a space, or I'm not sure, but some of our other agreements do, so we'll take a look at that.
Good thing. I think on the quality, so one of these is, instead of saying to assure, but change it to ensure, tomato, tomato, in my opinion. But if you look over on the second page of this, there's a line on here that says neither the union nor the district are required to negotiate suggested proposals. So
Okay.
Yep, pretty straightforward. Next page here, this is the same thing we talked about as far as, you know, overtime or I guess in this circumstances, maybe classroom vacancies. Actually, similarly related to what we just discussed, making sure that our folks have the opportunity to do that. You know, again, if we do have a situation where maybe people aren't certified to do that, okay, fine, understood. But this is just trying to keep the work in-house.
Okay.
If my pages weren't sticking together, this would be easier. This follows up on the EBC meeting, same language, just to be consistent. This is the rolling disciplinary language that we talked about with the previous session, or the previous group. For those of you who weren't part of that, what we're discussing here is having a rolling calendar for disciplinary action to advance it further in the progressive system. So, for example, let's say in January, an employee gets a written warning, right? Well, then that starts the clock on a 12-month period. Another offense comes up 6 months from then, say June, then, okay, you can advance it up. That's fine. You can use that, no big deal. They're on the clock for it, right? Well, from that 6-month period, from that June date, that's when the clock starts on the suspension rolling off. If something else happens later in that year, it's still on the clock, you can advance it up, that's fine. If we make it to January, well, the written kind of has become a moot point because you've already advanced it. But if nothing had advanced, it would just rotate off. And you would start fresh with written. The goal of this is to make sure that discipline is not punitive and is specifically focused on corrective action. As Tim mentioned in our last session, it's very much that people don't want to terminate. We want to give everybody a chance. Everybody wants a chance. And typically speaking, if people are messing up, they tend to do that fairly rapidly. So we're hoping that, people will actually learn from it. Like, hey, you're on the clock. You got to be good for another 12 months and you're good. So.
Yeah, and for the new people here who weren't in the last session, I just again like to share that the district has, really taken a strong approach to working on coaching, giving our supervisors resources that they could coach their employees. By no means are we looking to expedite the firing of people, for making simple mistakes or, initial instances of something happening. And we have very limited numbers of, suspensions, terminations that come to the board each year. It's very, very limited. So, but we will work with OPS on this to get some input and come back to you on that.
So this next proposal, I am under the impression it is something that is currently being done and is always done. So it's a little different from the previous one, Tim, in the regular session that we presented where it changed it from a 24 to a 12. I think when we kind of reevaluated this a little bit, if we roll in the 12-month, hypothetically here, and by all means, correct me if I'm wrong, then that would apply to everything, right?
Correct.
This is just making sure that people have a notice of it. Now, I understand it, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that when these written notations are given, people have to sign off on them, so they are presented. Is that accurate?
They are presented. If you get a
Okay.
verbal reprimand with written notation, they're presented with the written notation.
Okay.
Right? That captures the, what was going on. They have to be provided if they can decline to sign.
Okay.
And that does happen. But if they decline to sign, a witness who is there notes that on the sheet with them, and it is still provided
Okay.
to the employee.
So in that interest then, if we agree to change this in any of the units, I'd prefer that we keep it the same throughout the other units.
So
So
do
whatever
I.
we land on,
Right.
that's fine.
I agree.
Yep.
All right.
Alternative grievance procedure, as previously mentioned, this is probably pager language. Flip over. You guys probably saw this in the last one, same thing. FPSU qualified employee is not available, 3 months for temp folks to be available, things like that. Flip over to the next one for verification of illness. Same thing we talked about in the last one. We don't want to get into the woods on doctor's notes as far as what is contained therein. Tim, it's the one we're talking about with OPS. We're certainly open to counters on this to kind of do it. We did have a discussion about this regarding verification and validation, like you mentioned previously. So we're open to.
We did have a discussion on this one too. Anytime someone is being recommended to the school board for suspension or termination, it is handled by OPS.
Okay.
So nothing, no supervisor, no principal or director or something like that is saying, hey, I'm gonna fire this person, here you go, school board. It goes to, there's a very, lengthy process really for us, to be honest. So I would say, I mean, really, in my opinion, it would just be status quo because there are other, we do have an inspector general's office. They sometimes do investigations, but nothing will go to the board without it coming through OPS, to me, to the superintendent, to the board. That's the process that we follow, so.
A lot of liability there, right? It's always fun.
Yep.
This goes back to the independent medical examination that we talked about previously, regarding, if the district's already mandating it, they're already offering to cover the cost thereof. So this kind of gets deeper into the woods a little bit on this.
Okay.
Flip over, this is also describing the critical needs position. Again, our goal with this language is to get a little bit clearer understanding, not just for you guys, but also for the membership about what critical needs actually looks like or is, as opposed to kind of being a catch-all.
Yeah, there isn't, we haven't defined it at all. We don't, we talked about this in between sessions that, and I shared in the last session, I don't recall this ever happening. And I don't know that we would, I don't know why we would need, so with it's different, I guess. So when we have teachers, right, critical needs is easy, right? That's a lot of it comes down from the state Department of Education where it says, exceptional student education, math, science, reading, they're all high critical needs areas. Critical shortage really is what they are deemed by the state, and we add a couple to it that we feel are critical shortage or difficult to fill positions as well. I'm not really aware of anything else on this one. I can talk a little bit more about it with the team, but I again try not to add stuff in that's further muddying something that's not even used in the first place. So. I just don't know when we would have this. If somebody wants to transfer, they follow a transfer rule. They apply, the supervisor can hold them for 20 days, right? And then after that, they're free to go. That happens all the time, all the time. We have, thousands of transfers in our system throughout, a school year. So I'm really not sure where we would go with this one or how it would apply. I could probably walk into recruitment and say this, and they'd be like, we don't know what that is. It's never been enforced. Nobody's ever said, you can't transfer, you're in a critical needs position. If somebody's, because, let's just think about the reality of that. If somebody is in a position and it's that critical of needs that, hey, you're worth that much to us, you got to stay here, they'd leave the system before they would say, well, I have to stay here if I really don't want to work here. I just have never heard of something like this. So, but we'll review it as a team just to kind of think through what this means and how it would be used and get back to you next session.
Okey-doke. Now, this is one of my more favorite ones. This language is somewhat related to and I'm going to tell you the truth, Tim, I do wish I would have put this first sentence in the previous regulars, because I feel like maybe that happens with the regulars more than it does paras and ECPs. I say that involuntary transfers will not be used as a means of discipline. Moving somebody isn't always punitive, right?
Correct.
So I'm more of a deal with the problem kind of guy. That being said, as it's still noted, if the voluntary transfer is in the best interest of all parties as determined by management, we'll provide the detail, right? Now, that I'm also not saying that we wouldn't agree to something like that either, because like you noted in the last session, it might work. It might just be a chemistry issue. You move somebody to a different building, they work out fine. I don't want to shut down those talks like that, but I don't want it to be maybe arbitrarily done. You know what I'm saying?
It's very, very rare. We do not have a lot of involuntary transfers because I am aware of those when they happen. You know, there are placements that happen when excess placements or something like that. And it's, I think, you know, overall, it says involuntary transfers will not be used as a means of discipline. Well, they are not discipline. They're not always discipline related. They're I don't know. I'd have to think about how to word that, but it doesn't. You know, we're clear in the contract what discipline is. It's a verbal reprimand, a written reprimand, suspension, termination, right?
Maybe better worded as a means to avoid discipline or something of that nature, you know? I think what we're trying to get at is that if we do have an issue, we need to deal with it, as opposed to pushing it off somewhere else and maybe creating another issue somewhere else. I think that's what we're trying to get at.
I hear you. Again, I'm just trying to think of like, well, how big of a problem is this, right? Because I don't hear, I mean, I could think back to the last like involuntary transfer that I recall with the SEIU unit, and it took a lot of people on that call to make that decision. So they're not just, oh yeah, just involuntarily transfer them. That, you know, there's a whole lot of people pushing back on those things when that idea is even floated. So, and to your point, it is important to, you know, if we're having issues with someone at a site, it's usually, and I mean usually, almost always preferred that that site continue to deal with it rather than just moving the person somewhere else where you have to start over and understand what's been going on, right? Address the issues, coach them up, try to correct their behavior or whatever it might be to do the job you need to do. Or some cases it is just, hey, these two people might not work well together. They might not get along, right? That stuff happens. I just know that it is not a common situation with involuntary transfers in the district, but we'll definitely come back next session with some more input.
This goes back to the meeting we talked about prior to budgeting, you know, for training and things of that nature. I feel like, especially with the classroom folks, training might be more prevalent maybe than some other areas, right?
Yeah.
So this may be pretty solid for that.
We talked about this in between sessions as well, and one thing that we started with the teachers union years ago when I came in was we call it a coffee chat, right? And we sit down, and it was pretty much, sometimes it gets delayed, but it's almost monthly, right? Where we're meeting with the union heads, right? Not employees necessarily, but the union heads to talk about issues that they're hearing from their members and try to solve things and be more proactive, right? And get, just really have a much better working relationship, which is something that we feel is incredibly important, right? So I'd probably recommend something more like that. We did recently start doing that. Irwin has attended a few of those sessions, or maybe two of them. We had some changes in our staff, though, in our labor department. But we are very interested in continuing those. So I think because there are other like forums where I think the leadership hears from staff on issues or things like a town hall type of thing, right? But this, I'd like to recommend that we really just make our coffee chats or whatever we want to call them more regular, and with those designated people from SEIU, FPSU.
Will not say no to that.
I think it's been pretty successful, and it really prevents things from being kind of kept in the dark for a while, and then all of a sudden it just, top blows off and everybody's really upset about something. So when we start hearing that something's becoming an issue, or we see, hey, we could do better with this, ideas are floated of how we can make the work conditions better, or what employees are saying, hey, we'd like to be able to do this. That's a lot of things get solved that way. So we will kind of draw that up for next session.
Okay.
And bring it forward, and it would be something that would apply to all 3 units.
Sounds great.
All right.
Okay. This is going to take a lot of time to go through.
Yeah.
So I'm glad it's only 3 pages. Okay, I'll just start reading. Y'all feel free to jump in at any point, interrupt me. I'm not going to stop you. This is long. So this is specifically talking about physical restraints. Unfortunately, it does occur. Nobody wants it to, but it does, right? There are instances when exceptional students exhibit behaviors that are disruptive to the learning environment and pose a threat to the safety and persons or property. Should the use of physical restraint be necessary, employees are required to comply with School Board Policy 5.181. Exceptional students enrolled in programs for an emotionally behavioral disability, EBD, or an autism spectrum disorder, ASD, because of the nature of their disability, may on occasion experience impaired impulse control or such severity, I'm going to talk today, that the use of physical restraint is necessary to prevent such students from inflicting harm to self and or others. Students enrolled in other exceptional student education, ESE, programs may also experience crisis behaviors that require the use of restraint. Specific physical restraint procedures may also be approved for use with other specific student populations upon mutual agreement of the parties. Such agreements will be reviewed on an annual basis. And, to your point a minute ago, Tim, this might be something that comes up in those coffee chats where it's like, maybe it's not an annual basis. Maybe this is something we need to talk more immediately about. Strategies for the prevention of aggressive behavior shall be utilized on an ongoing basis. However, when an explosive event occurs without warning and is of such a degree that there is an imminent risk to persons, the use of physical restraint techniques is authorized for such circumstances. Physical restraint refers, to the use of physical intervention techniques designed to restrict movement of a student in an effort to de-escalate aggressive behavior. In order to promote a safe learning environment, the district has authorized the implementation of specific physical restraint procedures to be used in programs for children who are eligible for services in EBD and or ASD. These specific procedures also may be used with other exceptional students when that should be it is, not itis, middle note, indicated on the student's individualized education program, IEP. These procedures include, but are not limited to, holding and escape techniques, which, when implemented, prevent injury to students and staff. This is also going back to the training discussion we were talking about, where I know a lot of the school districts I work with directly, we have trainings like that, because unfortunately, I'm assuming you do too, but they update annually for the most part. Some new method of reduction or escalation, comes into play. So definitely want to make sure we're staying on top of that. I'm not going to go through all this because I think we all get it. But the purpose of this is making sure that this is there and making sure that we understand it and making sure that everybody else understands what it can and cannot be done. It's an issue amongst with our folks that we definitely want it to be trained, no doubt about it. And we want folks to be able to have a reference point for that. Now, again, this is the long form version, right? Is there a way to condense this? Probably. And we should definitely look at that because it's 3 pages. But again, our point here is to stir the discussion on that and get to a point where we are all on the same page. Attorneys, I know you're going to love reading this. I'm glad you're here for it. But this is some of the things that we have concerns about. Specifically, the types of restraints is really kind of what we want to get more into. And I don't want to say restraints in some sort of mechanical sense, but I'm just talking about even procedures, techniques, you know, escalation scales. I'm sure your police probably follow as well, right? We would like to have classroom folks, and maybe to some extent other folks, also trained in how to deal with these situations and,
Sure.
and how to address them.
What I think I can do is, I will discuss this with our Executive Director of Exceptional Student Education, who's, you know, an expert on this stuff, and is also aware of a lot of the trainings that do occur already, and we'll review this language and come back to you on that for sure.
Would love to.
All right.
And then what I believe is the last page, also pager language. Getting rid of these archaic pieces here.
No dispute there.
Yeah, always good. So just to kind of recap, a lot of what we're going to see today is across all three contracts.
Right.
Again, I think everybody has a vested interest in agreeing to the same language everywhere. So that at least on these items, uniformity makes everything easier, right? I see the attorneys nodding.
Well, it does, and also for all the supervisors. I mean, if
100%.
it's like, well, which unit are you in? I have to do this. We try to get away from that.
Yeah.
And make it easy for them to understand what, you know, contract language says for each.
I also do want to touch on one thing that was mentioned a couple times about, you know, it's already in a policy or it's already kind of done this way. During the break, we had a discussion regarding, yeah, that's true, and that's great. I would rather have language that we don't use that exists in the event we need it, as opposed to having an event where we don't have something that is there. God forbid, y'all ain't always gonna be here, we ain't always gonna be here. It's gonna be different groups coming through. I've had administrations that were really great come and go and get replaced by administrations that are not so great. A lot of our language is semi-predictive. Yeah, they may be once-offs, the involuntary transfer, for example. They may be limited now. That's great. I hope they are. But having something in the contract that kind of governs on both ends how this operates in the event that it becomes more frequent is very helpful on all ends. Are we going to be able to predict every little thing that happens? No. And like I said in the last session, if I could do things like that, I wouldn't be doing this job. But, you know, what we're trying to do is kind of address things that we have seen pop up, and that we would like to have language, even if it is memorializing a current practice or a current policy into the contract, so that, you know, somewhere down the road, God forbid something happen and that policy changes, we don't have that to fall back on anymore.
Right. Okay.
So,
Well, we'll keep that in mind when we're going through this, and we'll have some, you know, counters or some different, you know, versions of this language for the next session.
thank you very much. Appreciate
All right.
it.
All right, thank you. And I guess that our next session is 2:15 on March 13th. That's for para ECP. It's 2:15 at 3:45. That's if we want to keep this format, and I'm not sure if that's the goal or not. But
I
we can
think-
discuss that later if you want.
I think while we're on that subject, once we get into economics, this might work out a little bit more. For the broader discussions like this, where we are talking about all three, it might make sense to just have combined sessions. So we may want to reevaluate the 13th as maybe
As a one,
Yeah.
all in, right?
yeah. Now,
Yep.
again, economics, yeah, 100%, we should break that up. Because, I mean, that's going to be wildly different, I'm sure. Everybody's got their own thing.
Okay. Well, then I guess we would leave it that way. Are you planning on bringing that in the next session?
Possibly.
Okay.
Diane and I had talked about some information requests. I'm checking with Erwin to make sure that everything is filled out.
Okay.
There's some other things coming into it.
All right.
But we can discuss that.
Yeah, sure.
That's fine.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here today. Appreciate your time, and we'll see you in a week.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.